But I like having said that and acknowledging that there are levels of what can or can't be
Hmm.
important, I guess. I do think that this is an important game. I think it's a game that that speaks to the current moment
Yeah.
because I kind of came up with the idea of basically using this interrogation of androids
Hmm.
as a metaphor for getting to know people in our reality
Right.
who are, who have oppressions sort of laden against them, who
Mm.
are, underprivileged, who are, severely disadvantaged. And it hasn't gone exactly as I envisaged in that
Hmm.
first kind of whoosh of, oh, I could make this thing. But I think that we've kind of stuck to the mission of we want this to be a game that isn't just like a fun sci-fi thriller adventure,
Hmm.
but is also something that kind of turns certain ideas that are resonantly like relevant
Yeah.
to what's currently going on in the world right now, particularly in America.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's one of the things that caught my attention right away, and I'm sure it caused my brain to run in a direction that was not entirely counter, but very different to what your first prototype of the game was, and that first
Mhm.
imagining that I saw. I saw. What did I see? Jesus. Um, I see people who aren't people, right? People who are not treated as
Yes.
people because they're androids in the case
Yeah.
of this fiction. But
Mhm.
as you said, what a perfect metaphor for under people who are underprivileged or face oppression, that are not treated the same as certain others. And I think if
Yeah.
that's the core of the game, which I would say is the case, and
Mhm.
might be what you would say was your original core starting out, or do
Yeah.
you want to answer? Yeah.
No, I
Um,
think so. Like if the game has like a mission statement, it
mhm.
would be like who gets to be called a person.
Right. Right. And this is cyberpunk, and this is any sort of like
Hmm.
robot, android, cyborg, like any sort of fiction like that, if it's sort of sticking to its roots, is tackling questions of that nature. Um, yeah, and I think this game, this thing that we've come up with, is very true to that. It's a very emotional game.
Hmm.
Emotions have and always have been, or are and always have been, the core of the mechanics of the game, um, as a vehicle for discussing people and personhood and rights and oppression and removal of rights. Yep, yep.
No,
And
absolutely,
for those
absolutely.
and for those reasons, like because we're discussing those issues, I think we're safe in saying this is an important game, or a game that has meaning or value in discussing the world through this fictional reality that we've created.
Yep, I think so. Yeah, I kind of appreciate the fact that you came in and took it in a not a totally different direction, but like you added your spin on that as
Mm,
well. Because the way that for people who don't know, which I think is like all people except us two,
probably.
yeah, the way that the writing process worked is that by the time we started writing characters, we realized that I was having to do programming
Hmm.
and the occasional like bit of art assets and making this editor software that we were using
Hmm.
and debugging and I was doing all of this stuff. And you kindly offered to take the bulk of the writing on.
Yeah.
And so I still sort of have fingerprints on every character, but
Hmm.
you're the one who kind of presented those first drafts to me,
Hmm.
and so you're kind of the person who was able to like pick up a character, a concept that maybe you or maybe I'd come up with,
Hmm.
and just take that concept and just sort of decide what kind of direction it was broadly going to be going in.
Right.
And I might edit that and I might add to it, but
Hmm.
you're the one who kind of was like, this is the overall kind of trajectory that this character's going to have.
Right. Yeah, I think I mean, I don't want to say it's unfair to say, but I think it's inaccurate for you to say you only have some fingerprints on these characters. Like you said, I took a
Mm-hmm.
concept, whether it was originally your concept or originally my concept, and sort
Mm-hmm.
of laid the framework for that. And in most cases, or not even most, in every case, when
Mm-hmm.
those characters were passed back and forth, I'm assuming from your case as well as mine, uh, there were things that we had never imagined
Yep.
being added to
Yep.
the characters and directions that were just mind blowing. And
Yep. No,
every
exactly.
time
Yeah.
the characters switched hands, it was like, yes, this is so much better.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I really love those moments.
Mm,
So I'm gonna hit you with a question now.
please.
So I don't know which, which I'm gonna get to ask, and I've got a bunch. So I
Hmm.
think I might pick the kind of juiciest
Oh yeah,
one.
the ones you're most excited about. I'm gonna do the same
Yeah.
thing.
Well, this is just like okay. So I've got. I'm gonna ask. Um, So we have a bunch of characters. We have, I think,
Mm,
11 characters
hmm.
in the final game
Yep.
that you viewer will be able to play on April 20th.
5 days.
And exactly. But Danny, which character would you want to spend time with in a chill cyberpunk cafe?
Ooh.
And which character would you definitely not want to meet on the mean neon lit streets?
Ooh, great question. Great question. I'll start with the latter half first. I feel
Yeah.
like it's obvious. I feel like every playtester we've had has said the same thing. Bernard
hmm
Hughes is a dick.
Oh, he's awful.
Don't want to meet him. I don't want to meet him. Like,
Oh.
for the most part, all of our characters are pretty sympathetic. And if they're not
Mhm.
sympathetic, then they're just by the books, right? I'm
Yeah.
thinking of the Hunter. I'm thinking of AM221 to a certain
hmm
extent. Pretty, like, I won't say cut and dry, because none of the characters are just cut and dry and simple.
There's always something.
Right. Um, but yeah, I would not want to see Mr. Bernard Hughes in this neon soaked cyberpunk future. No, thank you
No.
at all.
No. He
Um,
can bugger right off. Yeah.
yeah. Though I do have some comments. I have some thoughts about him.
Mhm.
That became very clear after watching a streamer play the game. Um,
Okay.
but to answer the first half of your question, who would I want to spend the most? Who would I most want to spend time with of the characters? It's tricky. I don't know. I'm tempted to say Shakira because
hmm
she's been such a key figure for most of development. Like she's definitely the character who received the most attention, I want to say.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Um, and so I feel like I have a really good sense of who she is already, so that would just ease conversation sitting in this cafe together, right? Like I know who she is.
Yeah, like
Um,
you get her because you
yeah,
like wrote half of her.
yeah, yep, exactly. That's part of it. But also just for the fact that she's just a firecracker. Like
Yeah.
her attitude, her spunk, and like the life she made for herself is something that I identify with to a pretty big
hmm
extent.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I totally get that.
mhm,
I think we both kind of drew on elements of our own lives
mhm,
for Shakira more than for other characters
I think
because
so.
Shakira is this woman who like leaves everything behind and goes off to start a new life in a city she's never been to. Which I
Hi.
think we both kind of wind up doing in Austria.
We have, yeah. I mean, neither of us are living in our home country, so
Yeah, yeah,
that's a start.
yeah. And I also think that she's just like she's a fun person.
Hmm.
If you annoy her, if you step out of line, if you say something unacceptable, she will she will bite back.
Oh yeah,
But for reasons that like she will have a good reason for it,
yeah,
I guess.
yeah.
And I think that if I were to meet Shakira, she's the sort of person that I would be privileged to count among my friends.
Mm,
So I think she would be my like cafe choice.
yeah.
As for not meeting somebody on the mean streets, I think that like if it's in terms of like who would you just not want to
Hmm.
have a coffee with,
Hmm.
yeah, I think Bernard is just an asshole.
Yeah.
I think also there's a character called Professor Atta
Hmm.
who he's very theoretical and philosophizing, and I think that he might drive me a little bit crazy
Yeah.
if I were to actually talk to him.
Yeah.
But I think that probably just because there is a character whose like internal game ID is literally Hunter,
Hmm.
and whose job it is to track down people who may or may not be androids and like
Yeah.
throw them up and throw them in the back of the van.
Hmm.
I think he's definitely the one that I would least like to meet in a dark alley somewhere.
That makes sense. So you're
Just because,
admitting to being an android. Otherwise, you wouldn't be
uh,
afraid of meeting him.
but how could he tell if I'm an android? What if he makes a mistake?
What if he
What if he
does?
retires a human by mistake? Hashtag Blade Runner quote.
Not an inspiration at all.
No.
No. Okay, my turn to fire at you.
Okay, cool.
I kind of wanted to take it in a much different direction and talk a little bit about our the difference in our professional capabilities, so to
Mhm.
speak. And so this is going to be a question about development. Um,
Okay.
um, Based on your experience programming Silicon Dreams,
Mhm.
making this beautiful game that you have whisked from the nether into existence through digital means.
It is
Um,
weird like that. Yeah.
what, based on that experience, what do you most want to learn to do next?
Oh. Okay.
Kind of the question is partially filling out missing skill sets and
Mhm.
partially like what's just something exciting that you want to take on from a programming perspective.
I think from a programming perspective, there's a bunch of things that I've learned from this project, and I'm going to bring them into the next one.
Mm,
And I think that if I could just like learn any skill at all for purely practical purposes, it would be like source control and
right.
all of those like background technical things that
Hmm.
I've never really had time to learn, but are quite important.
Yeah.
But that's not really exciting. That's just like it would be good to have.
Right. It helps the process, but isn't
Mhm.
flashy really.
Exactly. So I think that what I'd really like to do is the Kickstarter that didn't go so well because it looked kind of not very good.
Yep.
That sort of taught me the importance of things looking great.
Mm,
And I've always thought to myself, like, I don't care about visuals. I only care about the game and the mechanics and the
yeah.
story and stuff.
Yeah.
But if I'm being brutally honest with myself, one, when I'm browsing through the Steam store and a game looks a certain way, usually top-down RPG Maker style pixel art,
Hmm.
for example, it immediately turns me off.
Hmm.
And that's I, there's something about
Hmm.
your first impression of when you see a game that is pretty important because
Yep.
it's an artistic statement.
Yep.
And two, I've also like really enjoyed making Silicon Dreams look really nice.
Yeah.
Whether that's like taking on assets from Cat, our freelance artist,
Hmm.
or whether it's like just spending some time myself making some assets and then sort of loving them, popping them in and stuff. So I think the thing that I'm most excited to kind of expand my skill set is how do I like make games that look good kind of more easily
Right.
because I like um, to be able to whip up kind of early versions of games that already,
Hmm.
because of my understanding of how different scripts work and how different and how Unity's UI system works,
Right.
whatever, where I can like easily and quickly make stuff that looks good
Mm,
without having to spend like a day banging my head against boundaries and sprite rescaling and that kind of thing.
sure. Yeah. Really interesting.
Hmm. What is the thing then that you are most excited to add to your skill set after this thing is done?
I think it's the same. I think
Oh,
this
cool. That's great.
experience really got in both of our heads about art,
Hmm.
and just visual style, because it is important. And I think I was very much in the same place as you that I appreciate games that look good. I love seeing these digital worlds that have a unique, just beautiful, bespoke style that just
Hmm.
evokes the rest of the mechanics in the world and ties everything together. Um, and I didn't expect to say this. I didn't expect that I would ever sort of be leaning in the direction of art, but I would really like to get better at it. I dabbled a bit in this project with 3D modeling and animation, and I am no longer an uber beginner. I've made a few steps in the direction of understanding how to just open Blender and make a shape and be done. And I want to push that and learn, like you said, kind of those automating a workflow. I know it's possible,
Exactly.
and it's. Mhm.
Because I got to the point with programming that like I'm not the best programmer in the world, but
Mm,
there are certain things that I really know how to do.
yeah.
And so whether it's like I need this interface element to flash,
Hmm.
or I need to enable or disable this group, or I need to like load a list of JSON files, or whatever. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I just get in there, bash it out, it's done. Um, and every time I do that, I get a little bit better at it.
Yeah.
And I think I'd like to have that kind of facility with like artistic or like
Hmm.
visual um, uh, not mechanics exactly, but like systems and
Right.
things moving around.
Pipelines, to use an industry jargon
Yeah,
term.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yep. Automate those pipelines.
Yep, yep.
Oh, it's an important step of the process. Got to be done.
It is. It is.
Um,
And to just add on to that,
mm,
that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to like be super complicated.
hmm.
Because I think what we really missed in the Kickstarter is that like it doesn't have to look complicated,
No.
but it just has to have an art direction.
Yes.
The Kickstarter lacked art direction, but there's a ton of games that I've played that look fantastic, but they build that look out of pretty simple elements.
Right. Right. One that we've talking um, about a potential future project. It's just like layers of silhouettes.
Yeah,
And there have
exactly.
been a number of games that have just done something as simple as that. Just a couple layers with a really nice palette, really clean silhouette style, and it just pops. Yep. I
Exactly.
like it.
Exactly.
Okay.
So yeah, I cannot wait to get onto that. Right, I think it's
It
my turn to ask a question.
is it? Oh, I think it is.
Yes. I'm also going to remove them from the list, otherwise it's going to become an absolute like brain salad. And yes, that's
Absolutely.
a new term that I've just created. Yeah. So if you could go back in time
Mm.
to like January 2019,
Oof,
when we
that's
were
a
just
long way
starting
back in
out.
time.
Sorry, January 2020.
Right.
Yeah, I went too far. I overshot. Sorry. Um, if you could go back in time to the very start of development, so
Hmm.
18 months ago, give or take, what would you do differently, and what would you do the same?
Do I have all of the knowledge I've gained now? I mean, that's the point of the question, probably, right? It's
Well,
the
I guess so.
yeah,
So I'm thinking like, let's say that you don't. I don't want to ask a question about like, would you just like do something better because you now know how to do it better?
right.
It's not
No,
like, oh, I do Blender better because of course you would.
I couldn't
Because,
have. Hmm.
exactly. But it's like if you had certain information,
Hmm.
if you had like the hindsight that you now have,
Hmm.
what would you do differently and what would you do the same?
Oh, that is a killer question. That is
Mhm.
really hard. Um, I think I think my sort of I would have from a much earlier stage worn my producer hat a bit differently.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that was there. I think I had the right instincts at that time,
Yeah.
despite my lack of professional experience, right? Like it's only become clearer over time, like getting to where we are now.
Hmm.
But I think the instincts were there. It was an issue of having so many hats all at once and sort of just being tossed into the deep end of this project.
I agree. Yeah. Because I even remember one of the first like actual how do we do this
Hmm.
discussions we had was basically you saying, "Hey, I should be the producer," and I was like, "Yes, that sounds great."
Hmm.
And then,
And then, yeah, and then it's really true. It's really true. And I'm not like there's no such thing as blame. Like there's no point
yeah,
to casting fingers because like I mean one time doesn't work the way this question assumes it does. And we're here because of the process, and I've learned the things I
yeah,
have because of the process. But um, yeah, trying to wear that hat firmly on my head and like
hmm,
picking a timeline, picking like achievable
oh,
goals
hmm,
and sticking to them and just having the familiarity with tools and experience and the foresight to just more consequently plan our milestones.
I think so.
I think
Yeah.
that's the thing I
I
would have
mean,
done differently.
I mean, we did. we did kind of plan milestones.
We
It's just
have
that we
always
weren't.
planned milestones, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's that. To be honest, it's only in like the last 4 months that we figured out how to use Hack and Plan
Hmm.
properly.
It's true.
I think that honestly was the main problem with that.
Yeah.
We ran milestones. They were fine milestones. They were just in a format that didn't really make use of our planning tool, Hack and Plan,
Yep.
in the best way.
Yep.
So yeah,
And I think at least a small
I
part of that is, as well, is like, you can be a Scrum master. You can
mhm,
like be the best milestoner project manager in the world. Um, and if you're plopped into a new team, to a certain extent, all of those things might go out the window. Like
true.
based on the makeup of the team and the resources that you have at your disposal and the proficiencies that each member of your team has, like that thing's going to change. Like the nature of the project planning is going to be different. So
Hmm.
um, yeah, it would have been a different story to have had a different like planning mindset and different familiarity with these tools from the get-go. But also, it was our first go working together, and we
Yeah,
were like we were finding our feet in how we work together, in as much as like what the books say how you should do this is.
exactly. And I think that we discovered a number of things that like. I mean, I don't even know if I can put them into words because it's like a fish in water, right?
Yeah,
But a number of ways in which we work very well together that are probably not like totally industry standard.
yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And what's one thing that you would not change,
One thing that I would not change,
if
um,
you were to go back with that hindsight?
another good question. Um, Based on our previous discussion, this is going to sound ridiculous, but I wouldn't change our sort of like fumbling art direction. I think that was a really really big learning moment for us, and I think that
Hmm.
was a really
Yeah,
like big step along this path about that's going to inform a lot of things about how we go forward.
that's
And
true.
if like had we just happened to have stumbled upon like a really nice art direction just blindly, uh, I don't know that we would have had like the important lessons that we do now.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Like especially like the most poignant part of that to me is that fact of good art and really solid art direction doesn't have to be complicated.
Hmm.
Like it can be as simple as you want. There just has to be some sort of direction to it, right?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
I think that's my answer. I wouldn't change our fumbling art direction because I think based on that fumbling in the dark, we came away with that little nugget of wisdom.
That's true. So even if it cost us quite a lot of development
Mm,
time and just kind of slowed everything down a lot,
yeah.
you're saying that us like flubbing the Kickstarter visually,
Mm,
like that lesson is worth its weight in gold.
I think so.
And and this is a universe in which lessons apparently weigh quite a lot. I
Yeah.
realized as I was saying that. Wait, do they have weight? Are they not abstract?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that like I agree with you. I
Mm,
think that I'd much rather have that lesson than just have than save the few months of landing on a good
yeah.
art style. But I think the one thing that I would have done differently, like once we had decided to learn that lesson, is so for anyone who doesn't know, we launched the Kickstarter in April,
Hmm. Of last year,
and it last year.
not
Yep.
this year.
Not this year. No, there's no Kickstarter. Sorry. And then it ran for a month. So around mid-May, it failed, and we sort of took stock. Some polite people said they nudged us very gently, and they said, "You might want to think about some art stuff,"
Hmm.
which is very kind of them. And then we brought on a concept artist to do a little bit of work for us from a very nice studio here in Vienna called Cause of Creations.
Mm,
Actually, they do have a Kickstarter right
they
now,
do.
which, if anyone is watching, I don't think anyone is, but it's called Sephiroth, and it's a really
Oh,
beautiful 3D deck.
beautiful.
Just gorgeous.
I thought
So,
about backing it, but the level that I want was too pricey.
oh god, I know.
So
I want the box and I want
I
everything.
know, I know. Ugh. Anyway, back to
Anyway,
our game.
anyway, so basically, we got. I wanted to avoid spending money on a like an actual proper concept artist who could devote
Yeah.
like a full month to this
Yeah.
because I was like, we're a tiny studio. Surely we can figure this out.
Yeah.
Surely we don't need to spend that kind of money. Surely we can like make a kind of a deal with this local studio,
Mm-hmm.
and we can have this artist come on and he can mock something up and then we'll do it. And I don't think that that actually worked particularly well. He fulfilled the brief pretty well, but I
Mm.
think the issue was that he just didn't have the headspace to think, okay, what are they really trying to achieve with these graphics, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he came up with something that fit our brief pretty closely and was great, but didn't actually work for the game,
Yep.
and that was on us. And then fast forward another like 6 months or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and then some more people politely nudge us and say the visuals are still really not working.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, we decided to bite the bullet and hire Cat
Yeah.
for I think it was originally for a month, and
Mm-hmm.
then it kind of we wound up hiring them for another month on top of
Mm-hmm.
that. And just like it's a phrase I've heard here and there, which is the cheapest way to pay sometimes is with money.
Yep.
And I think that was totally true because we got a really for the amount that we put in
Mm-hmm.
money wise, we got out a really solid style for the game
Ah.
that just
Yeah.
worked because Cat had the time to actually think about it
Yep.
and implement it fully.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if I could change one thing, I would have just hired Cat like 6 months before we actually did
Yep.
and just bitten that bullet.
Yep. That, yeah, another interesting topic of conversation that I don't know if we have time to go into right now, but just like the shifting scope and the kicking that can down the road because we get a
Mm-hmm.
little money here and here and there from awards or prizes or something like. Yeah, very interesting topic of conversation. Might come back to it. I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
This one's gonna be a little bit of salt in the wound, maybe.
Okay.
You should be familiar with this sort of thing by now, but
Okay.
for everyone at home watching, right? If you don't know, game dev, making a video game is one, coming up with this idea that's just beautiful and perfect in your head, and it's exactly how it's supposed to be, and this is the game. This is it. And then the rest of development is cutting away pieces of that and making really
Yeah.
hard choices to shave down that core concept and tack things on to make it actually a good game.
Yeah.
In
Exactly.
most cases, right? Um,
Uh,
so yeah, to boil it down, game dev is just a series of really, really difficult choices.
yes.
What is the thing that you are most upset about having to lose, whether you think it would fit in the game now or not?
I Yes, I absolutely know what my answer is without a shadow of a doubt.
Yep.
So when I came up with this idea, I thought, okay, you're gonna interrogate androids. They're gonna be in like a cell.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna ask them questions. You'll be able to like, execute them or send them to have their mind wiped, or you
Mm-hmm.
can just release them. But I wanted there to be like a kind of push and pull regarding whether or not the android had been restrained, like
Yeah.
whether or not they had like cuffs on that made it impossible for them to move. Because my thinking was, let's say that you're interrogating an android, and the android says, "Oh yes, I'm definitely with the resistance. I absolutely have to get back to them. I know that this means that you had to kill me, but surely you can let me go." And I really loved the idea of not explicitly letting them go, but just like accidentally, heavy air quotes,
Mm-hmm.
forgetting to put the restraints on and accidentally forgetting to lock the door.
Yeah.
Because then you could turn around to your boss, who's this like someone who works for this giant evil mega
Mm-hmm.
corporation, and you could say, "Oh, well, I fully intended to execute that deviant android, but I guess I just forgot to lock him up, and
Mm-hmm.
he got away. It's not my fault."
Yeah.
So I really like that as kind of an extension of the mechanics that we've got in the
Mm-hmm.
report, because in
Yeah.
the report you can like you can tell the truth and you can rat out these androids, or you can try to like cover for them, and
Mm-hmm.
I thought this would be another really interesting kind of extension of that.
Yeah.
Um, but I just sort of I regret the fact that that the push and pull with whether they're restrained, whether or not the door is locked, like their physical their agency over their own bodies.
Yeah,
I feel it's a shame that that had to get cut.
yeah,
We just couldn't figure out a way to get it in and make it work and make it make sense.
yeah.
So yeah,
It
it just
makes
had
it
to go.
really it makes it really difficult for me to hear you talking about this because like I was your staunchest opponent against
Yeah.
against including it, but like I love the concept of it, right? Like
Hmm.
I love the idea and the sort of push and pull and the plausible deniability and the like restraining them or allowing them to leave and all of these things. I just
It's
it's so much.
complicated.
It's really complicated. That's what I was just about to say. Like, there's so much on the back end then of that system when you think about it.
Mhm.
Like, all of the information that you need to track, like whether it's a believable lie or whether your boss says no, there's no way. Like, all of that stuff in the
Mhm.
back end just becomes such a huge system.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where like I reckon if I had another 3 months to make it work, I
Hmm.
could probably make it work.
Yeah.
But that's 3 months of development time, which is a lot of time and money.
Yeah.
And also, and like, is it worth putting in that type of money
Yeah.
for a mechanic that apparently only I really care about? Um, and also, like, what if I'm wrong? What if I put 3 months in and it just doesn't come together?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I as much as I hate it, I think that was the right call.
Yeah. I think. Oh, it's so it's this. Oh, hard choices, right? Because
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Yep. That was my
Yeah.
question.
I
Great
mean,
answer.
I do feel that game dev is like it's not always like this.
No.
As in, I think this is a particularly like this mechanic is one that I'm particularly attached to.
Mm.
But it is like there's a lot of game dev which is about like you lay out what you'd like to be in the game, what is in this vision,
Hmm.
and then it's about okay, but what can you actually like ship? What can you
Right.
actually produce as a product?
Right. Yeah.
Because there are constraints everywhere, and you got to be flexible within them. So
Yeah. Yep.
yeah.
And that's where that sort of contradicts my point about like game dev being a process of shaving things off of that vision.
Hmm.
Because in other ways, like I don't know, I don't want to stick too hard to this metaphor if it stops making sense, but like when you shave something away, you find this like perfectly flat plane that's just
Hmm.
ripe and ready for stuff to be stuck back onto it, right? And so you
Yeah.
shave something away until you're at this base mechanic, and then what you're left with this sort of like foundation is a really great place to like easily add something on that perfectly
Yeah.
augments that mechanic and sharpens it in a wonderful way.
That's a really good point. And I do feel that if we got bogged down in the weeds of how we're going to do the restraints properly and this door locking mechanism or whatever,
Mm.
if we got bogged down in that, I think probably other aspects of like similar mechanics that
Hmm.
report specifically
Yeah.
would probably have got less attention and wouldn't be as
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very possible.
Can I
We
turn
can't
that?
say. Yeah. Please go
Yeah.
ahead.
So was there anything that you feel it's a shame that something couldn't make its way into the final product?
Um, I'm sure there is, but putting me on the spot, like, I don't know if this is my producer brain, just like, nope, it was cut, forget it, move on. That might be happening.
That that's valid.
Yeah. Um, God, what's
Uh,
something that I wish would have been in? Um, More ways to like explicitly manipulate your subject. I
yeah.
think that one for me is a big shame. We got there a little bit with the sort of the light and sound mechanic, but
Mm,
I think particularly this sort of like, you know what? I remembered. That's the one it is.
yeah.
Very early on, I was a really big fan of the idea of being able to get up out of your chair and walk
Oh yeah.
around in this space and interact with this space that is your
Mm,
office. Oh, I miss that. I think it would have been a very cool, very different game,
hmm.
but one that I would have been really excited to explore.
Yeah, I agree. As the programmer, I
Mm,
have to say it's a great idea, and I really do love it.
yeah,
But just it was hard enough
yeah,
to move from a 2D project with sprites
yeah,
to a 3D project where you can't actually move, but you can
yeah,
only look around.
yeah,
So I just think that moving it into a project where you can also move around would have just
yeah.
killed me.
I mean, I think this is a really fun little tidbit for anyone watching
Yeah.
this. There was a compromise there because originally in
Mhm.
the game you couldn't even
Oh yeah.
move your head around, right?
Yeah.
And I think that was sort of our compromise that like, nope,
Yeah.
moving around in 3D space is absolutely off the table. But what we're gonna get in is this like being able to look around the space when you're not
Mhm.
focused on the tablet.
Yeah.
So,
Because I originally liked the idea that it was going to be more kind of efficient by
hmm,
having a fixed screen, because then every part of the screen would be absolutely accounted for, and you'd know what it was doing.
yeah,
But I do actually I like the fact that the game kind of locks into that
yeah,
configuration. Like when you actually start playing
yeah,
and you start engaging with the
yeah.
interrogation, then it locks in. But until then, you have this freedom, and I actually think that was a really good idea on your part,
Oh, thanks.
and something that I really didn't like, but now that I'm through it,
Hmm,
it has added so much to the game just in terms of atmosphere.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Hmm.
I'm going to ask you another question
Do
now.
it. I'm ready.
Um, hmm. Okay, this is kind of a juicy one.
Yes.
If you were an android, what model would you be, and would you break free of your programming?
Ooh, I love that question. Um, i- whew. Um, if I was an android, I would be one of the diagnosticians, I think,
Hmm.
and I would be the type. I would be the very middle of the road.
Hmm.
Um, I think not the gung ho full on Kronos android like let's kill them all. And also not the one that's like pushing super hard for the revolution to the
Hmm.
extent that I'm getting myself executed. Um, I like to think I would be that very like choose your battles, take on what you can take on, help where you can, and like where you can't, that's just the world that you're in.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't fix everything, but do what you
Mm,
can where you can, and if you can't, it's just how it goes sometimes.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah. And I think like I don't remember if this was your comment or mine, but earlier on in development that was one of the things that we had mentioned as like encouraging that sort of motivation, that sort of thought that like if we're going to draw back from the game and talk about the game in context of the larger world,
Hmm.
one of the core sort of guiding philosophies is that like big actions are very, very rarely the result of a single person doing a huge monumental task. Very much more often than not, it's a large number of people making very, very small choices over time.
Exactly.
So I think my response to which type of android I would be ties into that.
I think that's a really good
Hmm.
point. And I'm just now wondering, like, thinking about that message, did we bring that through? And I think we did,
I
because
mm,
like there are some points where your individual actions are actually really, really important.
hmm,
And like if you press this button or this button,
hmm,
it totally changes a really key outcome.
yeah,
But I kind of feel like we had to have some of that
hmm,
because it's a video game and there had to be some kind
right,
of climactic actions
yeah,
or some actions that felt really significant.
yeah,
But the thing I like about those moments is that, yes, your actions are very pivotal, but they only are so pivotal because of the work of other characters
right,
who've brought the situation to this point.
yeah,
And so even if your action is super important, like it's actually one of the least important parts of that chain of events.
right. And I think to tag on to what you just said,
Hmm.
I also think just like the nature of the game sort of obfuscates those choices.
Hmm.
Like I
Yeah.
don't know that I can't think of one of those like really key choices aside from like the final like culminating scenes
Hmm.
where it's broadcast like this is a big choice moment. because all of the UI and all of the interaction is the same
Mhm.
across every scene.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
all of the buttons are always there, all of the you can always ask questions, you can always do all of these things, and it's never that like hero moment like okay, now it's time for you to step up and do a real big thing.
Yeah. There's no like. There's only one moment in the entire game, which is the equivalent of like, okay, important protagonist character, you have to choose whether you're gonna save the little sisters or murder all them
Yep.
babies or whatever.
Yep.
It's like there's only one moment that's even remotely like that,
Mhm.
and I think in context it actually makes sense.
Mhm.
And all the other moments are just like you're in this situation. What do you do now? It
Yeah.
feels more like that. Yeah.
It's the mundane, and I think that's the reason for me that I feel pretty confident saying that we did stick to that like
Hmm.
design philosophy because none of those big choices seem like big choices, just like
Hmm.
they don't seem that way in the real world. You're just living your life minute to minute every day as you do, making the choices that you make because of the things that you've learned from people in your past or
Hmm.
the broader situation around you, and you just carry on making choices, and then suddenly, boom, society is a totally different thing than it was 10 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep.
I suppose I have to answer my own question
I
now.
was about to ask you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if I were an android, what would I be? I think I'd probably be I'd be built as one of those kind of secretary androids
Mhm.
who are like half making sure that my owner's life runs smoothly,
Mhm.
and half kind of intellectual sounding board for them, like a
Mhm.
secretary for like a professor or a
Yeah.
kind of a CEO who thinks that they're like an intellectual with
Mhm.
a capital I.
Yeah.
And I think that I don't know. I like to think that I'd break free of their programming,
Yeah.
um, but I think that it would have to depend on what I was exposed to,
Yeah.
because I broke free of some of the cultural baggage that's associated with being born in Britain and
Mm.
only being exposed to certain levels of privilege and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Which is not to say that I'm like fully free of that, but I have a much better perspective on it now.
Mhm.
But I think that that was because I was exposed to the right things at the right time.
Right.
So if I were such an android, um, I think I would have to be exposed to like certain realizations
Mhm.
before I could actually break free.
Yeah.
Because, like, to be clear, I used to vote conservative when I
Mhm.
was like 17, 18. I thought that,
Mhm.
the left wing was the worst thing ever and they were
Mhm.
running the world into the ground and it was up to the conservatives to take control and, balance the books and all that stuff, which is all, turns out, absolute nonsense. Um, because, like, for one thing, conservatives spend way more than leftists do anyway.
Mm.
But I had to have my eyes open to certain things before I could
Yeah.
break out of that programming.
Yeah.
And so I think that it would be the same for Android me.
Yeah. That's really interesting. My experience is very much the same in that regard, being raised incredibly conservatively and then going off to university and learning that that's not necessarily the solution to the world's
Yeah.
issues. Um, if I can, I don't know if I'm allowed to do this. I'm going to try though, like because what you
Oh,
said sparked a thought, or sparked an answer to one of the questions that I was going to ask you. So I'm going to answer it for myself and then put it back
oh,
to
cool.
you.
Okay, cool.
The question is, if players walk away from this game having learned anything, having learned one thing, or having had their eyes opened to any
Mhm.
sort of like truth about the world, what would you hope that is?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Um, and for me, that hope is that people can only grow insofar as they've been exposed to the way the world works, or they've been exposed to a certain reality or certain information at a certain time. Um, a sort of like sub answer is that I hope people become more compassionate and more open to hearing people's
Mhm.
perspectives.
Yeah.
But I think the larger form of that response is um, having the empathy and the patience and the willingness to meet people where they are and understand where they're coming from, which is
Mhm.
like the entirety of the game, really.
Yeah, because it's nothing but meeting people where they are.
Hmm.
Or like, okay, technically they're in a cell in an undisclosed location. You're somewhere else, so you're kind of meeting them. Uh, where they're not. But yeah, but I totally agree. Yeah.
Mm,
I think for me, it's like, yeah, there's several things that I'd like people to learn. But like one is that when I'm faced with like the Black Lives Matter movement, or
mm,
the treatment of refugees and immigrants, or like when I think about the issues in Northern Ireland, for example,
yeah,
and all the history there, it's very easy for people to become like fixated on one individual event
yeah,
and not understand its context.
yeah,
So, like, if the Black Panther Party like do use violence against cops, they're like, ah, well, now they're violent.
right,
Or if the IRA do like strike against the English Protestants in Northern Ireland, it's like, ah, well, they're doing this thing and it's bad. And in a lot of cases, it is bad, and I would prefer them to find a different solution. But
hmm,
I think that it's important that you look at those actions within the wider political context. And
right,
that's not easy because they usually go back hundreds of years
hmm,
and are really difficult to pin down, and everyone has an opinion on them, and it's very difficult to
yeah,
figure out what actually that context is.
yeah. And in many
So
cases
I,
are not like aggressive acts of violence or not the sort of
Mhm,
organized forms that you see that people call out in these cases.
mhm,
Sorry.
exactly, yeah. And that's kind of why I don't think I've really told anyone apart from you this,
Mm,
but that's why I kind of used the history of the Haitian Revolution, which was the one successful, the one thing everyone knows about it is that it was the one successful slave revolt that
right.
resulted in a free country. Um, but the reason I picked that one to kind of model this on was that I just wanted to know, okay, how, if you have a slave class and they gain freedom, which
Hmm,
was a story that I wanted to tell,
hmm.
like how does that happen?
Yeah. What does that look like?
Exactly.
Mm,
So I've probably not done an impeccable job, but I hope that I've at least got closer than a lot of people telling stories in that kind of area. So
yeah.
I hope that people come away thinking about those broader, like the, what it's like to ask those questions
Yeah.
about entire groups rather than about individuals.
Right.
But there is also one other thing that I'd like them to come away with, which is that like I think all these characters, except for one, which is the one that I really hate the most and had the most fun writing.
Hmm.
Um, all of these characters, bar one, have good points and bad points,
Yep.
like as individuals. So
Yep.
to flip all the way down to the other end of the spectrum,
Right.
like there are even the best characters have elements about them that I'm not totally sure about,
Yep.
and even the worst characters, except for that one, have something that like they have a moment of light, to be overly poetic about it. Like they have
Mm,
something in their character that is like notably good. That is
hmm.
something that I find that I can admire,
Yeah.
even if the rest of that character is like 99%. Oh my god, I never want to hear from you ever again.
Yep.
There's that one thing that I'm like, okay, that I will give you points for. That I think
Hmm.
is good. So I think I just wanted to highlight the fact that the game showcases people in all of their messiness,
Yep.
and it tries to kind of balance those two halves. It tries to
Hmm.
say, okay, people are messy and they have good and bad points,
Yeah.
and it's important to try and take them as a whole.
Yeah.
But also, we need to bear in mind the massive geopolitical repercussions of lots of people
Hmm.
being like this, whatever this is.
Yeah.
And I think the game tries to kind of straddle those two things, and I
Hmm.
think it does an okay job of
I
it.
think it does an okay job. Yeah. I like to think so. We're
Mhm.
we're the authors and the designers and the writers, so maybe a little bit biased. I'm very
Mhm.
excited to see what everyone at home has to say. Yeah, but
Yeah.
those are our hopes. That's if you see this before you play, like, I don't know, shouldn't spoil anything.
Hmm.
Shouldn't force you to think anything that you don't want to think. But yeah, keep that in mind. That's our hope. That's our intention.
Hmm. I have another a question for you,
Yeah.
which is so I'm guessing that there is a point in your past
Hmm.
when you really wanted to make games,
Yeah.
but you would just like you just weren't ready.
Yep.
And for me, it's like I'm 15. I really want to make games. I'm impatient to make them, but I don't
Mm-hmm.
have the technical skill. I don't really know how to make any assets. The indie scene doesn't really exist yet.
Mm-hmm.
There's no real way for me to make money on it yet. So
Mm-hmm.
at that point, I'm like, I really, really, really want it, but it's just I can't do it.
Yeah.
So if you could go back to that point in your past,
Yep.
whatever age that is,
Yep.
and you could show that version of you this game,
Mm-hmm.
um, what do you think that past you would say?
Ooh, hard hitting. My God.
This is
Um,
what I kind of took from my therapy session.
yeah, that's that's a really nice question.
Mhm.
Um, so uh, the sort of like point of failure where I bumped up against this wall of wanting to make games and bounced right off of it, was very technical in nature.
Mhm.
It was my first go at university. I was excited to be a game designer, developer, whatever, despite not really knowing enough about it even to like begin to understand what that would be like. And I failed out of my like intro to programming course twice in a row,
Oh, wow.
2 times in a row. I failed the same course.
Didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. Um, and promptly switched over to psychology and then went on to communication, which I'm so glad I did.
Oh, so that right.
Yeah.
Because I thought that puts a whole different spin on your journey. I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
I had intended on being a computer science major, getting my bachelor's in computer science, and I
Hmm.
just bounced off it so hard. A lot of background to my psychology about why that happened. But I'm glad that it did happen because it put me on this super wandering, meandering journey that just happened to end up with me being here. Like, this is gonna sound bad, maybe, but to a certain extent, I don't really feel like I put in the effort required to like be half of a two-person indie team, right? Like a lot of things kind of just fell into my lap.
Yeah,
Um,
it was a lot of things falling into place. To be honest, if I could go back in time and teach younger Danny to code to pass that unit, I would not.
that's what I was
Because
gonna say, and that's
I probably wouldn't have met you. Yeah.
yeah, that's all this preamble because like I mean that wasn't the question like what would I have learned to make it here faster or anything. But that's just the background information to say I what would I have had to say about this game? I wouldn't have believed it, first of all, because I had just bounced off of my programming courses. So like, no, I didn't make a game. What are you talking about? Um, aside from that, though, like, I wouldn't have enjoyed it as a game. Like,
Mhm.
I hadn't reached that point in my personal development and like my game design development where I appreciated the narrative of games. I was very much a Call of Duty like action gamer. So glad I came away from that. Um, yeah, I would have like enjoyed what it had to say and kind of like, okay, yeah, that's a game, I guess. Um, this is a really I don't know how to answer. I don't know how to answer because me at that time would not have been ready for this thing.
So it almost sounds like you kind of weren't ready to even receive this game,
Yeah,
much less make it,
yeah, I think so.
until pretty close to when you actually made it.
Um,
Well,
a,
okay,
a
give or
couple
take five
years,
years.
yeah, a couple years ahead. I
Mhm.
think like maybe even 10. I started to get more into indie games and the narrative stuff like in the later years of my university time.
Mhm.
Um, and then started, writing my own pen and paper narrative games about 5 years ago. Um, yeah, but I think you're right. I wouldn't have been.
If anyone's watching, you have won awards for. Psst.
I have no one's
Just throw
watching,
it
but
out
that's
there.
okay. Thank you.
I'm pretending they are. It's more fun that
Me
way.
too. Me too. It's a great time.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't feel like I have a super good answer to that question, despite how good it
Mhm.
was. So I'm going to put it back on you because I
Oh,
feel
okay.
like the
Thank you.
author of the question will have a much better
Oh, okay.
response.
Okay. Well, that's just, self-aggrandizement.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the question was, if I could take this game that I've just made back to like my 15-year-old self, who really wanted to make games,
Hmm.
how would he react? And I think he would be like thinking back to the scene, the game scene in
Yeah.
those days. Um, this was before BioShock had been released. This was
Damn.
before,
Yeah. Yeah.
to put it simply, this was before we got to have nice things.
Yeah.
Like
I mean,
there were a few fantastic games. Like I love everything from Looking Glass, like Thief and System Shock, and
yeah.
there's a bunch of really great games from that era. But it felt like every game that came out had to make it through a series of flaming hoops from publishers.
Yeah.
So that meant that you didn't get very experimental work, and it wasn't
Yeah.
until you got Bioshock,
Hmm.
which was like triple A narrative stuff. Like narratives can be more than just shooting aliens.
Yep.
And that also came out the same year, I think, that Braid did,
Hmm.
which to me was like the advent of when indie
Yep.
started becoming a thing.
Absolutely.
So I think it was that year when we got to start to have nice things.
Hmm. Where games
And
started to get weird in the best way
yeah,
possible. Like we can make
yeah,
weird stuff, and
exactly,
and it's marketable, which is sadly
exactly.
one of the requirements of making games.
Yeah, that's true. But I think that first of all, I would have been just absolutely chuffed to play this damn thing
Yeah.
because it would be unlike anything I have played at that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Like it's a little bit it's pretty unique even today in the
Hmm.
the whole emotional layer line order report thing.
Yeah.
That those are
Yeah.
mechanics that I haven't really seen elsewhere.
Hmm.
But back then, it would have just blown my mind.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that to think like I not only can play this,
Hmm.
but I made this. Well, what? That makes no sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, ridiculous.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah. So I'd be thrilled. I'd be absolutely thrilled. I sometimes think back to that version of me just to kind of give myself some perspective, and I'm
Hmm.
like, okay, we're we're doing all right.
We're
We're
doing
doing
all
all right.
right. Nice. Very
Yeah.
nice. That's actually a perfect segue into my next
Mhm.
question.
Okay.
And I want to avoid the like, I almost used a really rude phrase that I'm gonna not use.
Okay.
To avoid like patting ourselves on the back and the self-aggrandizement.
I know the phrase. Okay.
So does everyone else now, probably.
Thank you for keeping it clean
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
public stream.
exactly. Um, I don't think it's inappropriate to say that this game does a lot of really new, pretty weird stuff.
Yeah.
So in that sort of context, with that mindset, considering like our inspirations, right? Papers, Please is a huge one. The sort of like oppressive bureaucrat simulator. I think I
Mhm.
don't remember if it was you or somewhere else on Twitter that I saw that phrase.
No, it sells it
Neocab,
perfectly. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, Neocab, huge inspiration.
Mhm.
Like, in which regard do you think this game that we've made pushes narrative gaming in the most interesting direction?
I think so. It does two things that I think are really interesting. The first is the emotional layer to the conversation,
Hmm.
and the second is the report. So the emotional layer is for anyone watching, as you are asking questions in this interrogation, every response, in fact, every line in every response, can elicit an emotion in the subject that you're
Hmm.
talking to, the person locked up in the cell. So you can, and then those emotions can further dictate the course of the conversation.
Yeah.
So if you ask them, hey, tell me about your family, they might say, no, I'm way too angry. I'm not telling you about my family because you made me really angry because you just like, what is your greatest failure? And that made me super angry.
Yeah.
Or if you instead of asking about their greatest failure, you ask like what makes you happy every day or what are you thankful for, they'll probably be in a better mood to answer that question.
Hmm.
And I actually think this is something that we kind of scratched the surface of, but that could actually be done
Hmm.
kind of in a much kind of bigger way.
Yeah.
So I think that like it's at the right level for this game,
Hmm.
but I think that is one thing that it does fairly uniquely.
Yeah.
Um, the difference I think between that and NeoCab, which also has emotions which dictate the course of the conversation, is I think NeoCab still has what I think are kind of what you might call waterfall conversations. So you
Hmm.
start at the top and you end at the bottom, and it might take a different route, but it always goes down
Yeah.
because it uses ink, I think,
Hmm.
and that's how ink works.
Mm.
And I think that our kind of innovation on that is that,
Yeah.
like, yes, we have conversations where emotions go up and down, but you can choose what questions to ask
Yeah.
specifically in order to elicit those emotions.
Yeah.
So I think that's like the first thing, and the other one is the report. I'm actually really interested in what's been dubbed social stealth.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, Basically, because I played a game from the 1980s which was about social stealth, and
Hmm.
I've got it out of my brain, called King's Quest 3. But what the report does that I find really interesting is that there are correct or incorrect answers on the report. So a question might be, um, uh, is the subject capable of experiencing anger? Brackets. It really shouldn't be doing that, and
Yeah.
if it does, it's probably broken. So then there's the correct answer, which is yes, it can feel anger. It is broken. There's the
Hmm.
incorrect answer, which is no, it is not. It can't,
Hmm.
because it's not true.
Right.
But you might decide to give the incorrect answer and risk getting it wrong deliberately in order to cover for the android.
Right.
And I think that like when you have an entire report filled with those questions, like between 5 and 10,
Hmm.
I think that's a pretty interesting setup because it means that you're kind of trying to hide in plain sight.
Hmm.
You know it like there are stealth games, and this is not even a 3D stealth game; it's like
Right.
a verbal stealth game.
Yeah.
But there are stealth games which are all about are you seen or are you not seen?
Hmm.
But this game is about okay, you know that you're going to be seen. What do you or you know that those answers are going to be looked at.
Hmm.
What are you willing to risk, and what lies do you think you can get away with?
Yeah.
And I think that's way more interesting than just a Boolean tell
Hmm.
me God's real or not
Yeah.
type
Did you
situation.
give the right answer or the wrong answer?
Yeah,
Yeah. Nice.
yeah. To turn it back on you, did
Mm.
I exhaust that question, or is there something else that you'd like
Um,
to jump in on?
you might have. I might just take one of your topics in a bit of a different direction. This was
Hmm.
inspired by the way that you brought up sort of um, your concept of the I'm gonna fail my teachers, my professors at university by forgetting this person's name. There is a game.
Hmm.
Um, Now I'm forgetting words, just all of my words.
They're all gone. It's late.
Theorist, maybe.
Uh-huh.
A person who writes academic. There's the word. A
Yeah.
games academic
Yeah.
who describes um, game stories and game worlds with the term narrative architecture,
Hmm.
and sort of bringing in this space that the narrative layer or understanding layer or story layer of a game can be conceptualized in terms of 3D space.
Yes.
And I think you really tied in, like really tapped into that thought when describing how this game is functionally different in the way that we tell our story. Like you mentioned, NeoCab with the waterfall. Everybody knows branching narrative. Everybody knows linear narrative. And the way that you described it was like this game is to narrative as exploring a dungeon in Skyrim is to
Mhm.
exploring a 3D space.
Exactly. So narratively, you're saying that most games narratively are like an on-rails shooter where you can choose to go left or right, but you're
Hmm.
still on rails.
Hmm.
NeoCab is more like um, like a sort of on rails dodging game where
Yeah.
like you're falling down a waterfall and you can choose whether to go down this little loop or into this little lagoon, but you keep
Yeah.
having to go forward.
Yeah.
But ours is one where you have more control over where narratively you want to go.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's a really interesting, compelling way to tell a story in a digital space. And I'm sure it's been done to a certain extent somewhere
Mhm.
before, but I think this is one of the only games I know about to give you so much freedom when, where, and how you use the information you've gathered.
Mhm. Because the only other types of games that do that, I think,
Mm-hmm.
are adventure games like
Mm-hmm.
point and clicks.
Yeah.
But the problem with them is you get stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And the great thing about our game is that you keep returning to the questioning, to the interrogation,
Mm-hmm.
until you get stuck. And maybe you get stuck because you've locked something off
Mm-hmm.
unintentionally, or maybe you get stuck because you're just out of content
Yep.
and you've read absolutely everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then you finish the scene.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like an adventure game, but where you can say, "That's enough, thank you. I'd like the next scene, please."
Yep. Yeah. I like that a lot. I appreciate it about
Yeah.
this. I'm excited for ourselves and other designers to take this sort of idea and this model in a different direction and explore it further, because I think you were
Yeah.
spot on that this is really just scratching the surface of layering this sort of like exploration through narrative and layering emotion on top of that. I think there are a lot of legs left to a system
Mhm.
that can
No,
that
I
can
totally
take that
agree.
further.
Yeah. I'm pleased with what we got here, and I think
Yeah,
it's a fine game by itself, but
yeah,
I am really curious to see where else it could be taken. So I hope
yeah,
somebody like picks it up.
yeah.
Should we ask one more question
I was
each
thinking
and
that.
then call it a
That seems
night?
like a very good amount.
Okay.
Got to
Um,
pick a good one then.
uh, it's kind of a weird one.
That's cool.
What weird habits do you have, or like weird ways that your brain or your life works that help or hinder game development?
Hmm. Um,
Like, are there like
yeah.
particular ways that you organize your life that are kind of quirky and unusual that that have made it hard to be a dev, or that have actually kind of dovetailed?
Um, a lot of both. I think there are a lot of really nice synergies. Let's see. For example, well, it's very specific to this. I don't think it helps out with dev in particular, but like, I really like my house. I really my apartment in this case. I really like being at home. I really like my space. So having this sort of like flexible work arrangement, like you're on the clock when you're on the clock, working when you can work, and when you're not doing that, then you're not. That
Yeah,
sort of arrangement is absolutely fantastic for like the way that I structure my brain and the way that I structure my life. Like just the ability to like, oh, my dog needs to walk now. I can just like get up and take my dog on a walk. It's beautiful. It's a wonderful thing. As for the like quirkier side of things, uh, I don't think it's not something specific to game dev. I think this is a skill that everyone should attempt to hone to the best of their ability over the course of their life. It's just the ability to communicate honestly and openly and identify your thoughts and feelings and share them in a clear, concise way. Um, that's something that I've devoted a lot of time and effort and mental exhaustion to getting better at. Um, I think particularly in game dev, that is an incredibly
yeah,
useful skill to have. Just for, and again, this is going back to my master's education. Like game dev is one of the, if not the most interdisciplinary career path you can choose.
hmm
Artists, programmers, marketing people, production, advertisers, all of this group of people come together. So if you're interested in pursuing a career in this industry, regardless of the sort of specific path that you're following, learn how to talk. Just learn how to talk to people.
yeah. Because you can either do that all by yourself,
Mhm.
which I kind of did with Spinotality,
Mhm.
and that was quite difficult,
Mhm.
and I'm not sure I would fully recommend it.
Mhm.
Or you can learn to talk.
Yep.
And the third option is just nobody really being very happy and being a bit grumpy all the time. So
Yep. Yep.
No, I'd say that you're very good at that. There have been a few moments where we've had to kind of take a step back and just like make sure we're on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you've navigated all those really well. So
Mm. I mean, and you've been a participant in those, so it's a two-way street,
yeah,
always. Um, let's see. Did I put that one back on you?
not yet.
Okay, it's back
Good.
on you.
Okay. I think a habit that works for me is much like you. This pandemic has obviously made it has intensified the whole working from home vibe.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like the extent to which it has done that, but under normal circumstances, I'm perfectly happy to stay at home. And it's also good because it means like if something needs to be done around the home,
Yeah.
like I'm here to do it just in case. Because like if there's something that just needs to be done in like 30 seconds or a minute that
Yep.
can't be done unless I'm here,
Mm-hmm.
I can just get up, do the thing, and then sit
Yeah.
back down, which is super handy.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
the alternative to that is you're stuck in an office somewhere with this thing rattling around in your head all day that you
yeah,
know has to get done, and that just sucks. Like, no,
exactly.
thank you.
Yeah, very distracting. Very distracting. I would say that one like, I'm not sure if it's a habit or a mental health issue, but
Mm-hmm.
I tend to worry about things a fair bit,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that that's like I literally have generalized anxiety disorder, so
Mm-hmm.
it's
That's a thing.
it's more than just worrying.
Yeah.
And I actually think that that's quite good for game dev in some ways,
Mm-hmm.
because as long as it's kind of kept to a healthy level,
Mm.
it's good to keep one eye like looking over your shoulder,
Yeah.
because you have to remember lots of different things
Mm-hmm.
that need to be done. Like you need to pay people on time, and you need to remember to do the marketing and the PR, and you need to
Yeah.
book this thing and
Yeah.
whatever. Um, and also, you need to make sure that you don't run out of money. So
Mm-hmm.
it's good to always be thinking about, okay, I need to absolutely nail down these important things,
Yeah.
and to make sure that we will have enough money to get to the end of development and pay everyone,
Mm-hmm.
because otherwise bad things will happen. But I think that the downside of that is that if there's no clear route to success, but you do have every reason to expect that you will find a route within like a month,
Mm-hmm.
the anxiety doesn't like that. It's like, no, I want a route now. I want it now. It
Yep.
needs to be locked down. Um, so yeah, so that's one habit which is like not so helpful. I have been quite stressed for, I would say, the majority of this project,
Mm-hmm.
just based on money and timelines.
Yep.
And we did luck out quite a few
We
times,
did.
so
We did.
some of that anxiety was justified. But I think that there's a certain point where it stopped helping,
Yeah.
and it started to become like a problem rather
Yeah.
than a help. So
Yeah. Oh, good question. I have one more. I guess this will be the final one.
final one.
I don't know. I feel like we've already drifted away from talking about Silicon Dreams a little bit, so I'm going to keep that trend up,
Oh, okay.
and stay actually topical, or partially topical to what the last question was about.
Mhm.
Y- you have an experience that I do not have, and that is
Mhm.
working on games both as a solo dev and on a team. Now with me. Hello, teammate. Um, so my question is a two-parter. What is the thing that most surprises you about working on a game in a team?
Mhm.
And if there is one, I imagine there probably is, the most challenging aspect of working on a team compared to working on your own.
Okay. So what surprises me and what's challenging?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think probably the surprise is kind of twofold,
Mm-hmm.
and it sort of cancels each other out. I think that the one thing that surprises me is that, counterintuitive though it may seem, when you bring someone on, things get done.
Mm-hmm.
Because like when I was working solo, I did have some people helping me, but I had to do everything, and
Yeah.
that meant that I also felt that I was the only one who could do everything. Like
Yeah.
every single thing needed my say so and my
Right.
like me to actually go do it. Not
Even if
just
you have a
because
freelancer making art,
Mhm.
you're still in control of like managing
Yeah,
that artist.
exactly,
Mm.
and you're still the one that puts it in the game, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I think there was a feeling that like there was this assumption that kind of grew up around that experience, which was that like the reason that I have to do everything is not just that I'm the only person here, but that I am the only one who can do everything.
Right.
And so it was nice. Like right now, we've been working this past week flat out, ready for launch.
Yep.
Um, but and it's really nice handing tasks off to you
Mm.
that really do have to get done, that are very important, but that I can just breathe easy knowing that they're being handled.
Yeah.
But the other thing is that like once I accepted that, it kind of surprised me that I didn't just hand all this stuff off and it didn't just magically get done because I'd said that it needed to get done.
Mhm.
It's almost like time exists or something. Because like there were a few times, and this is not the challenging bit
Mhm.
because it wasn't really challenging. It was just like, from my perspective, it's like, oh, but I told you to finish things A, B, C, D, and E. So
Mhm.
I don't.
Why aren't
You got A, B, and C done. What about D and E? Like, I'm not accusing you, and it's not a
Mm.
problem. But I just this seems strange somehow. Which just goes to show that at the end of the day, I'm a monkey like all of
Yeah.
us, and
Yeah.
I react to things that I see, and it's not always logical. Yeah,
Yeah.
because humans are like that sometimes.
They sure are.
And I think probably the challenging thing is like, I don't know. Let me think for a second. Sorry,
Mm.
I'm not blowing my cheeks out at you,
No, I
but
know that.
there's a process that I had to start on my laptop 5 hours ago, and it just pinged me.
Oh God, of course.
So okay, it's right. It's dealt with. It's fine.
Yeah.
Um,
If I could make an assumption, because I had a
Yeah,
thought
yeah.
about this when I was writing the question,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
like as much as it causes anxiety to have sort of
Mhm.
everything on your plate,
Mhm.
my assumption was maybe that anxiety also comes with a certain sense of control. That like because
Mhm.
everything's on your plate, you're in charge of all of it. You can
Yeah.
determine every change, every addition,
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
removal from that thing that you're making.
That's absolutely true. Yeah, because it became a little bit of a. I think it happened when I relinquished control of the writing to you. I think
Yeah.
that was the moment where I was like, okay, I cannot do everything. It is just not possible. I might be able to have fingerprints on
Mhm.
everything, but there's no way that I can like veto or confirm every single word
Yeah.
that goes into this game.
Yeah.
Because and I could do that with the previous game. Like I had to because
Mhm.
there
No one
was no
else was doing it.
directions.
Mm.
Yeah. But I think that was the point where like I accepted that, and I'm now at a stage where like you and Nina, one of our localizers, are off kind of making edits in the background,
Mhm.
and you're like, "Is this okay?" And then send the sheet through. Are you sure it's okay? And I'm like, "Yep, yep, whatever. Just
Go,
it's fine,
go, go,
it's
go.
fine, whatever."
Yep.
It's like
I think I've
I,
started picking up on that, like especially really recently, because that was
like
something that was.
today, yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, but because it's like I have such faith in the game as a whole
Yeah.
at this point that I don't sweat the small stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a challenge because it does mean a relinquishing of that
Mhm.
tightness of focus, but I think it's definitely worth it.
Yeah. I think I have a really similar. I didn't think I would have an answer to this, right? Because I don't have the solo dev experience that you do, but I have noticed something very similar in that I felt very compelled, especially early on in the process, to check everything by you. I mean, one because I was a total newbie and like had just no professional experience in the industry, um, but two because I just felt that that was the expectation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure that's the case. Like, I think it's nice when it makes sense to like, I made this. Is this like what you thought? But I think there's another point where that becomes a hindrance. It's
I think
like
so.
there's a
Yeah.
certain point where each of us can own our own thing after we've determined the direction and the scope of the thing
Yeah.
to be able to say like, yep, this was my task. I did my task. Here's the thing I made.
Exactly.
Back to you to do the next thing with it.
Yeah. And it might be I did my task. Here is a first draft, or here's a rough version.
Yep. Yep.
Because you might need some input as to whether or not it's the right direction. But
Yeah.
it's like this thing is now, it has reached a certain stage
Right.
where it is sort of semi-complete.
Yep.
Whereas, yeah, I think that particularly with the writing in the earlier days, we agonized over Steve over and over.
Yeah.
He was the first full character we
Yeah.
wrote.
Yeah.
And it's actually really helpful because the thing that you realize when you are the more experienced member of a team is what you really want when you delegate is for
Mhm.
someone to just go away
Yep.
and then magically bring you something that's really good without you having to worry about it.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, so not having, like, I think it's fine if you have to check work when you're like training someone or you're
Mhm.
getting up to speed, but
Mhm.
it's so good just like saying, please do this,
Yeah.
and then a week later someone
Yeah.
comes back and they say, I did it, look, and you're
Yeah.
like, great, fantastic, yeah.
Yep. I think Steve, like, to try and like wrap this up soon. I don't want to just
Mhm,
ramble forever, but I think Steve is a really, really interesting example of exactly that thing,
mhm.
because that was the first character I wrote. That was the first one in the writing process. And there was a lot of agonizing about, like, well, what if I take it this direction? Can I take it this way? What do you think about blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And it's just unhelpful. And then if we flash back to like a week ago,
Hmm.
I've had it in my head the entire time that I'm so dissatisfied with Steve. Like, maybe in part because of that back and forth, and it just got confused and
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
But I just straight up said, like, I'm unhappy. I'm changing Steve. And then I did, and I just whacked a bunch of stuff into another place and like just cut some content from other places and just like, Jamie, this is done. Here's Steve, the new
yep,
version. You
yep,
never really even looked at it.
exactly. And you know what? I still haven't looked at the new version because I've been so busy doing other stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
I'd like to get round to playtesting him,
yeah,
before we launch. Um, but that's mostly for bugs, to be honest,
yeah,
because I think you know Steve well enough and you
mm,
know the game well enough that
yeah,
I just trust you to make the right calls there.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It feels good. It's been fun to like grow into that confidence in. I don't know. For me, I'll speak for myself. Like, to grow into that confidence in my own abilities,
Mhm.
to be able to like feel comfortable just saying like, "Yep, that thing that you're giving me, I got it. I'm gonna go away and do my own thing, and not pester you every
Yep.
5 minutes with like, what about this and that."
I think that's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to say though, I just like to share the fact that when I started planning this game, I had such confidence in my abilities to write these characters that it was like, well, I'll just make this system, and I'll make this system, and I'll make this mechanic, and then I'll just do some writing for 6 months, and it'll be fine. So I just sort of imagined that when I put pen to paper, as it were, everything would just sort of magically work out.
Yeah.
Um, I kind of feel as though, yeah, the in terms of like level or scene design and structure, I wasn't that far off, but
Mhm.
I missed all the other system stuff that had to be going on as well.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. Whew. It's been a process. Is sort of
yeah,
the end comment, I guess.
yeah, it has been a process.
It's been a super fun 18 months though.
It has, and the game has changed so much.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
Oh my god.
yeah, but
Well,
I'm super happy with where it is now.
yep. Me too. Just
And
thrilled. Can't wait to get it in people's hands.
I know, I think we scared everyone off.
Yeah, we did.
But I guess we should end now,
Hmm.
and I'm just gonna, I guess, practice my shilling,
Mhm.
which I can do freely because there's nobody watching, so I can flub it as much as I want.
Yep.
So yeah, if you liked what you saw here, and you wanna learn more about the game, well, it's in the store page, which you can see right there. It is releasing on April 20th. This weird and wonderful cyberpunk interrogation sim that we've been working on. We'd very much appreciate it if you wishlisted,
Hmm.
because not only do you get the notification, but it tells Steam that this is a game worth like
Mhm.
surfacing, worth drawing attention to.
People are
Um,
interested in this thing.
exactly, and
Yeah.
we really, and if you are if you are on social media, which I suppose most people are, and you want to keep following not just the game but also us, then we would absolutely love to have you as one of our followers. We will be totally thrilled.
Yep. Absolutely true. Absolutely. Everything he said. Yep. 5 days. Start the countdown. Wish list if this any of this has caught your attention. And go check it out. We're on all the social medias. He said it already. I don't need to repeat it.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well,
Okay.
it has been an absolute damn privilege to work on this game with you and to see it develop,
Right back
like
at you.
being batted back and forth
Yeah.
between the two of us. And I cannot wait to
Yeah.
see what the world makes of it.
I'm so glad that you trusted me enough in my game design chops to give me your baby and let me help you raise it with you.
Yeah, the baby took 18 months to raise rather than
Hmm.
the initial 3 months I was planning on. But
Yeah.
oh well, lesson learned.
Lesson learned. I don't know. Yeah, that's kind of just life. It became what it needed to. It took the time it needed to and what was available, and I'm so thrilled with what it is now.
Me too. Well,
Okay.
as we said, Silicon Dreams is coming April 20th. Please wishlist and follow and all that jazz.
Do it. Thanks for joining us.
See ya, cyberpunks.